What if the person you trusted most was the one who hurt you the deepest? She once believed in love, the kind that felt safe, unshakable. But love had a cruel way of changing. One day, it was warmth and whispered promises. The next, it was silence and a door closing behind him. Now, standing in the ruins of what they once had, she faced a choice. Fight for him, or finally let go. But what if everything she thought she knew was a lie? What if love, no matter how broken, still had one last chance? Ivy Quinn had never made a single choice for herself. Her life had been planned before she even learned how to dream. Every decision, what she wore, what she studied, who she spoke to, was dictated by her parents. There were no negotiations, no compromises. Their rules weren't suggestions. They were law. Friends are distractions. Dreams don't pay the bills. Success requires sacrifice. And Ivy had spent her entire life sacrificing. She wasn't raised in a house, she was raised in a system. A carefully controlled structure built around achievements, perfection, and silence. There was no room for rebellion, no space for mistakes. While other kids ran barefoot in the summer grass, Ivy sat indoors, memorizing equations. While classmates whispered about crushes and weekend adventures, she kept her head down, drowning in textbooks. While the world outside pulsed with life, she lived in the stillness of a house where love was conditional and expectations were chains. You don't need freedom, Ivy. You need discipline. Her mother's voice had always been soft, yet unyielding. We know what's best for you, her father would add, his word final. It wasn't abuse. Not in the way people imagined. There were no bruises, no harsh words. Just control. Quiet, suffocating control. Her days were structured down to the minute: school, tutoring, test prep, sleep, repeat. She was allowed no distractions, no outside influences that might steer her away from the path they had carved out for her. She was an investment. And they expected a return. We sacrificed everything to give you this life, her mother would say, adjusting Ivy's collar, ensuring not a single wrinkle remained. You owe us this much. We are building your future, Ivy, her father would remind her, sliding another stack of textbooks onto her desk. You'll thank us someday. And so, she obeyed. She excelled. She became everything they wanted her to be. But deep down, in the quiet hours of the night, Ivy wondered. If she wasn't allowed to want anything, then who was she really? The moment she stepped onto campus, it was like stepping into another world. For the first time, there were no rigid schedules pinned to her door. No watchful eyes tracking her every move. No suffocating silence pressing against her chest. For the first time in her life, Ivy was alone. And for the first time in her life, she was free. But freedom, she quickly realized, was terrifying. She wasn't used to choices. She didn't know how to make decisions that weren't already mapped out for her. What classes should she take? What should she eat for dinner? Who should she talk to? Every question felt like a test she hadn't studied for. She watched other students move effortlessly through campus, laughing, arguing, falling in and out of love as if the world belonged to them. She envied their ease, their confidence. Had they always been like this? Had they always known how to live? Ivy didn't have the answers. But as she stood there, staring at the endless possibilities before her, she knew one thing for sure. She was going to try. Because this time, for once, her life was hers. And she was ready to live it. Ivy had never known freedom until she met him. Knox Wilder wasn't just another student, he was a storm. A force of nature that demanded attention without trying. He wasn't just charming, he was magnetic. Confident. Untamed. While Ivy lived by rules, Knox lived to break them. She should have stayed away. But something about him made her forget everything she was supposed to be. A comment about a professor. A shared glance across the library. A casual challenge disguised as a joke. "You don't know who you are yet, do you?" he had asked one night, his voice quiet but sure. Ivy hesitated. "I know who I'm supposed to be." That's not the same thing. Somehow, that was all it took. Knox didn't just see her, he understood her. He saw the invisible chains around her wrists, the weight of expectations pressing down on her shoulders. And he dared her to break free. Knox was the first person Ivy had ever chosen for herself. He made her feel things she had never dared to before: passion, recklessness, the kind of love that burned so fiercely it felt like freedom. With him, she laughed louder, spoke without second-guessing, felt alive in a way she never had before. "What's the wildest thing you've ever done?" he asked one night, as they lay on the rooftop of his apartment building, watching the city lights flicker below them. Ivy thought for a moment. "I ran away from home once." Knox turned his head, studying her. "You never told me that." "Because it doesn't count." She exhaled, a sad smile forming on her lips. "I only made it 2 blocks before my father found me." Knox was quiet for a moment. Then, he reached for her hand, lacing their fingers together. "You're not that girl anymore." "Aren't I?" "No." His grip tightened. "You don't run away anymore, Ivy. You fight." And she wanted to believe him. She needed to believe him. But freedom, Ivy would soon learn, always came with a price. She never knew how. Maybe someone had seen them, maybe someone had told. But none of that mattered. The moment she stepped through her front door, the world she had tried so hard to escape came crashing down around her. Her father sat at the dining table, a thick envelope in front of him. Ivy's stomach twisted. She already knew what was inside before he even spoke. "Sit down." His voice was eerily calm. Ivy stayed standing. Her mother reached for the envelope and tilted it forward, letting its contents spill onto the table. Photographs. Her and Knox, caught in stolen moments, a kiss by the library, a lingering touch outside his apartment, a look that said more than words ever could. "Tell me this isn't real," her father said, his voice cutting through the silence like a blade. Ivy's pulse roared in her ears. She swallowed hard. "I love him." The words hung in the air, thick and suffocating. Her mother's expression remained unreadable. Then, in a voice laced with finality, "Then you are no longer our daughter." They didn't just take away their approval. They took everything. Her tuition, her housing, every single dollar that kept her afloat, it was all gone. Just like that, she was no one. Her father's voice was calm, detached. "If you leave now, Ivy, you don't come back." For a brief, fleeting second, she almost hesitated. Not because she wanted to stay, but because she had nowhere to go. Knox was furious. He wanted to fight for her. "Fix it. Fix everything. Let me help." His grip on her hands was tight, his voice desperate. "I don't care what it costs, Ivy. I won't let them do this to you." But Ivy had spent her whole life being controlled. She wouldn't trade one cage for another. "I can't let you save me. This isn't about saving you, it's about loving you." She wanted to believe him. But love didn't pay tuition. Love didn't give her back the life she lost. Still, when she had nowhere else to go, when she had no one left, Knox didn't hesitate. "Come home with me." And for the first time, Ivy let herself fall. Because she had nothing left to lose. Except him. And she had no idea She was about to lose him too. For the first time in her life, Ivy felt like she had everything. She had Knox, the man who had shown her what love could be. She had Lily, the baby girl who had given her purpose. She had a home, a family, a future. She had finally escaped the cage her parents built for her. And then, with one envelope, it all started to fall apart. It was a quiet evening when it arrived. Ivy was in the kitchen, humming softly as she cleaned up after dinner. Lily was in the living room, giggling at the cartoons on TV. Knox had just come home, his presence filling the space with warmth, something steady, something safe. And then, the knock at the door. Knox opened it, and Ivy turned just in time to see the envelope slide into his hands. It was white, crisp, and official looking. Her heart sank. Knox's expression didn't change, but Ivy saw it, the way his fingers clenched slightly, the way his breathing slowed just enough to be noticeable. "What is that?" she asked. Knox didn't answer. He just opened it. And the moment his eyes scanned the letter inside, Ivy knew. "No," she whispered. He looked up at her, his jaw tightening. "I've been deployed." Ivy felt the world tilt beneath her feet. "For how long?" Knox exhaled, running a hand over his face. 8 months. Maybe longer. The words hit like a physical blow. "And Lily? And me? What are we supposed to do?" Knox's gaze flickered to their daughter, then back to Ivy. "You'll be fine, Ivy. You'll figure it out." "Figure it out?" A bitter laugh escaped her lips. "That's all you have to say?" "What do you want me to say?" His voice sharpened. "That I'm scared. That I hate this. Because I do. But I don't have a choice." "And what about us?" Ivy's voice cracked. "Do we have a choice?" Knox didn't answer. And that silence was enough. Because this moment, was the beginning of the end. At first, it was subtle. "You should start handling the bills, Ivy. Learn how to do things on your own. You can't rely on me for everything." Ivy thought he was just preparing her, making sure she could manage things while he was gone. But then, the words changed. "You need to stop depending on me. You have to be strong without me. Don't wait for me, Ivy." The warmth in his touch faded. The soft "I love yous" became routine, empty. She didn't recognize the man standing in front of her anymore. And she had no idea why. One night, Ivy made Knox his favorite dinner, hoping, praying, that something as simple as a home-cooked meal could bring him back to her. She set the table, lit candles, tried. But when he walked in, he barely glanced at the food. "You don't have to do this," he muttered. "Do what?" she asked, throat tight. "This?" He gestured vaguely at the table, at the effort she had put in. Trying so hard to keep things normal when we both know they are not. Ivy's hands trembled as she picked up a plate. And then, without thinking, she threw it against the wall. The sound of shattering porcelain echoed through the kitchen. Knox froze. "You don't get to do this," Ivy snapped, her voice shaking. "You don't get to push me away like I don't matter. Like we don't matter. I'm trying to help you, Ivy. By making me miserable." Knox's jaw clenched. "By making sure you're strong enough to handle things without me. I don't want to handle things without you." "You might have to," he roared. The words slammed into her like a punch to the chest. And for the first time, Ivy wondered, was Knox leaving her before he even left? Ivy lay awake, staring at the ceiling. Knox was beside her, but the distance between them had never felt greater. She turned onto her side, searching his face in the dim light. "Do you still love me?" she whispered. His breath hitched, just for a second. Then, his hand reached out, brushing a stray lock of hair from her face. His fingers lingered for a moment, just long enough to make her believe. Just long enough to hurt. "You don't need me, Ivy." He didn't answer her question. And maybe that was the answer. The morning Knox left, the sky was overcast, grey and heavy, as if it, too, knew something was about to break. Ivy stood in front of him, holding on to his uniform, like she could somehow keep him from slipping away. "Just tell me you'll come back," she whispered, her voice barely holding together. Knox's arms were stiff at his sides. He looked down at her, his face unreadable. "You'll be fine, Ivy. Not I love you. Not I'll miss you. Just that." Ivy's hands trembled. Why was he doing this? "Knox, please." But before she could finish, he took a step back. And for the first time since she had met him, he felt like a stranger. "Take care of yourself, Ivy." Then he turned and walked away. Ivy stood there, holding her breath, waiting, begging, for him to look back. But he never did. And just like that, he was gone. The first week, Ivy told herself she could handle it. She followed the budget Knox had left for her, paid the bills on time, cooked dinner for Lily every night. She kept busy, because the moment she stopped moving, the weight of his absence became unbearable. But no amount of budgeting could change one simple fact: the money Knox left wasn't enough. Between rent, groceries, medical bills for Lily, and the unexpected expenses that always seemed to pop up, Ivy realized she wouldn't last 3 months, let alone 8. She applied for jobs. Dozens. "You don't have a degree?" the hiring managers would ask, brows furrowed as they scanned her resume. "No, I had to leave school." They would sigh, offer her a polite smile, and say, "We'll call you if something opens up." But no one ever called. One night, she sat at the kitchen table, staring at a pile of overdue notices. Lily played on the floor, blissfully unaware. Ivy's hands clenched into fists. Why did he leave us like this? Knox had told her to be strong, to stand on her own. But all she could think was, "He left me to drown." It had been a month since Knox left. Ivy had barely heard from him. A few short phone calls, nothing more. He never asked how she was doing, only if Lily was okay. "We're fine," Ivy would say, even though it was a lie. And then, one night, the phone rang. Ivy's heart jumped. It was late, too late. Maybe something had happened to him. Maybe. "Ivy." Knox's voice was steady. Too steady. "Knox? What's wrong?" A long pause. Then, "I need to tell you something." Ivy's fingers tightened around the phone. "Okay," she said slowly. Another pause. "I've met someone else." Her body went still. "What?" "I didn't plan for it to happen, but it did." His voice was emotionless, like he was reading from a script. "I think it's best if we both move on." Move on. The words echoed in her head, making her dizzy. "You're lying." Her voice cracked. "I'm not." "Knox, please. This is for the best, Ivy. For the best." Ivy felt her breath catch. Her hands trembled. "You told me you loved me." Silence. "You promised you'd come back." More silence. Then, "Goodbye, Ivy." Click. The call ended. And just like that, so did everything else. Ivy sat there, frozen. Then, without warning, a strangled sob tore from her throat. Her fingers clawed at the table, her body shaking violently as she gasped for air. The pain was unbearable, like someone had ripped her heart out and left a hollow, bleeding hole in its place. Knox was gone. Gone. And he wasn't coming back. She might have stayed on that floor forever, curled up, drowning in grief, if not for the soft sound of tiny footsteps. "Mommy." Ivy's head snapped up. Lily stood in the doorway, clutching her stuffed rabbit, eyes wide with confusion. And just like that, Ivy stopped breaking. Because no matter how shattered she was, Lily needed her. And this time, Ivy wasn't going to fall apart. The next morning, Ivy wiped her tears, took a deep breath, and started over. She had no money, no degree, no backup plan. But she had a daughter. And she would never let Lily suffer, because of a love that no longer existed. Sarah, her kind-hearted neighbor, saw the exhaustion in Ivy's eyes and offered a lifeline. "You're a great baker, Ivy. Why don't you sell some of your pastries online?" It started small, selling cakes from her tiny kitchen, taking freelance work late at night after Lily was asleep. Day by day, she built herself. She was no longer the Ivy who needed saving. She was the savior. 3 months later, Ivy was tucking Lily into bed when the phone rang. She glanced at the caller ID. Knox Wilder. Her hands didn't shake. Her heart didn't race. She picked up, her voice steady. "What do you want, Knox?" A long pause. Then, I heard about your bakery." A small, hesitant breath. "I'm proud of you, Ivy." She almost laughed. "You don't get to be proud of me." "I know." Silence stretched between them. Then, in a voice filled with something dangerously close to hope, he said, "I'll be home soon." Ivy exhaled slowly, gripping the phone. "That doesn't change anything." Another pause. "I know." But he didn't. Because the Ivy he left behind didn't exist anymore. And when he came back, he would realize he was the one who lost everything. Knox Wilder had spent months picturing this moment. The moment he would walk through the door, see Ivy standing there, see Lily run into his arms. The moment he would finally breathe again. But as he stood outside her home, his hands clenched into fists, he knew this wasn't going to be the reunion he had imagined. Because the woman on the other side of that door was not the same Ivy he left behind. And this time, she might not take him back. He knocked. A few seconds passed. Then the door creaked open. And there she was. Ivy Quinn. Her hair was longer, falling in soft waves over her shoulders. Her frame was still delicate, but there was something different, something unbreakable, about the way she stood, chin high, eyes unreadable. For a second, neither of them spoke. Then, finally, "You came back," Ivy said flatly, arms crossing over her chest. "I told you I would. And I told you it didn't change anything." Her words landed like a punch to the gut, but Knox forced himself to stay still. "Don't push her. Don't mess this up. Can I come in?" Ivy hesitated. Then, without a word, she stepped aside. But she didn't invite him in. She just let him in. And Knox realized, for the first time, that this wasn't his home anymore. Lily sat on the living room floor, drawing with crayons. The second Knox stepped in, her little head lifted. "Mommy, who's that?" Knox's breath caught. She didn't recognize him. Ivy's face remained impassive, but something flickered in her eyes, something broken. "That's your dad, sweetheart," she said softly. Lily blinked up at him. "My dad?" Knox felt something inside him crack. His daughter, his own flesh and blood, didn't remember him. He crouched down, forcing a smile. "Yeah, baby. It's me." Lily tilted her head. Then, after a long moment, she turned back to her drawing. Okay. Nothing more. No excitement. No hugs. Just okay. And Knox had never felt more shattered in his life. That night, Ivy let him stay. But not because she wanted him there. Lily deserves to know you, she had said. That's the only reason. And somehow, that hurt more than if she had slammed the door in his face. The next few weeks were hell. Knox tried. He read to Lily at bedtime. He helped Ivy clean up after dinner. He showed up, day after day, hoping, praying, that she would let him back in. But Ivy kept her walls high. She didn't argue with him. Didn't cry. Didn't scream. She just existed. And that was worse than anything. One night, after putting Lily to sleep, Knox found Ivy in the kitchen, wiping down the counters. "Talk to me, Ivy." His voice was raw, desperate. "About what?" she said without looking at him. "About us." Finally, she met his gaze. "There is no us, Knox." His chest tightened. "I know I hurt you. But you have to understand, I did it for you. For Lily. I needed you to be strong." Ivy let out a hollow laugh. "You think I became strong because you left me?" she asked, shaking her head. "No, Knox. I became strong because I had no choice." Knox's throat tightened. "I thought I was doing the right thing." "The right thing?" Ivy's voice broke. "You let me believe you didn't love me anymore. You let me think I wasn't enough. And now, you just expect me to open my arms and forgive you." Knox ran a hand down his face, frustration bubbling to the surface. "I didn't expect it to be easy, Ivy. But damn it, I'm here. I came back. You shouldn't have left in the first place." Silence. She turned away first. "Good night, Knox." And just like that, the conversation was over. And Knox realized. Maybe love wasn't enough to fix what he had broken. Love is not just about passion, about the highs of falling and the warmth of belonging. True love is tested in the moments of doubt, in the choices that tear people apart, and in the pain of learning that sometimes, even the best intentions can lead to the worst mistakes. Knox thought he was protecting Ivy by pushing her away. He believed that by forcing her to stand on her own, he was making her stronger. But love should never be about control. Love should never be about deciding what's best for someone else without giving them a choice. Ivy learned the hard way that the only person she could truly depend on was herself. She was abandoned, left to pick up the broken pieces of a life that was once intertwined with Knox's. But she didn't let the pain destroy her, she let it shape her. She built herself up from nothing, not because Knox forced her to, but because she refused to let his absence define her. And then, when Knox came back, expecting to fit into her life like he had never left, Ivy faced the hardest question of all. Can you ever truly forgive someone who broke you in order to save you? This story isn't just about second chances. It's about understanding that love isn't about making someone stronger by leaving them. It's about staying and facing the struggles together. It's about learning that apologies aren't enough if actions don't change. Knox had to realize that love is not about control, it's about choice. And Ivy had to decide if she was willing to give him another chance, knowing that loving someone again also means risking the possibility of being hurt once more. Because in the end, strength is not about standing alone, but about knowing when to let someone back in. And love. Love isn't about never leaving. It's about always finding your way back, for the right reasons, at the right time. But the question remains, does every love story deserve a second chance? Some wounds heal. Some don't. And sometimes, love is about knowing when to walk away.